by for the Brewery Underground Podcast.
In Asheville's harbor rise, craft and brews will meet the skies. Stephen Scott, they lead the way. Brewery Underground, night and day. Raise your glass, let's ignite. In this city, we unite. Raise your glass, let's ignite.
Hey, so imagine what we're doing here today on the Brewery Underground Podcast. We're actually talking about beer, and we're talking about breweries. And Scott, here's a teaser for everybody out there. On the next podcast episode, you're actually going to be talking about your trip to Asheville, North Carolina, a lot of places that you went with folks that you met up in the beer community. But today, this is a precursor to also a personal tour you got when you were in Asheville. So take it away, my friend.
Okay. Before I introduce our guest, though, I got a little preamble.
Gotcha.
I got a little babbling to do.
Babble away, babble away.
Well, I was actually, and this just came up late this afternoon. I was kind of doing some research and stuff and kind of finalizing this episode. And I was scrolling through our projects on Riverside. And every project is an episode, and every episode has a thumbnail next to it. And I was just scrolling through, and I just got to take in all the people we've talked to from all the various places all over. And I thought, man, we are extremely lucky to have that many people on from all facets of the beer community, from all parts of the country. And I thought, I just kept going through the catalog, and I go, my God, we're building something here. We've got a pretty good catalog. We continue to build on the catalog. And in my opinion, we're doing pretty good stuff. And I just, seeing all those faces when I was scrolling through Riverside today, it made me a little bit proud.
A tremendous smorgasbord.
It is. We got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, across of what we do and the folks that we've interviewed and the folks we've talked to. So it's been a fun ride, and it continues to be.
One of the things we try to do on here is we try to educate and inform, don't we?
Yes, we do.
It's usually our guest is usually doing that, but we try to.
Well, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that because I feel like every episode I learned something, and I think in this episode I'm going to learn a lot.
We both are. So we talk about all craft beer perspectives and kind of what goes into it. We've talked to a malt house. We're working on a hops company. I don't know when we're going to do about water, but maybe we'll figure that one out later. But today we've got yeast. We're going to talk about yeast. And we've got Pablo Gomez from White Labs out of Asheville, North Carolina with us. And I'm very, very excited about this episode. Pablo, welcome.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Steve. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being on. Pablo, you are the Southeast and Latin American Technical Account Manager for White Labs. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my title.
What does that title entail?
Well, terrible job visiting breweries, drinking their beer. It's like it's based on sales, but on a technical way. At White Labs, we believe that just selling. Let's be honest, who likes salespeople? So
the office, they bother you.
Yeah.
Knock on your door.
Plenty of emails. So way we try to approach customers or non-customers. It's by being a tool, help them with anything, questions, technical questions or anything, and we can help them making better beer. Having better fermentations, yeast management, whatever it is. So those are my territories, but also I'm kind of like, I'm the person who actually gets all these, cases. If there's anything people haven't questioned, that has no territory. I deal with people from anywhere in the world, like trying to help them in a technical way.
I got to meet you, as Steve said. I was there recently. One of our first stops was White Labs. You were kind enough to meet the group and give us a private tour of the place. Phenomenal. Steve was like just our little group. He took us around as like a private little tour of the facility, and it was awesome. Pablo, will you talk about the campus a little bit? Because you've got, not only do you have the yeast facility on campus. You've got the brewery, and you've got a tap room and kitchen, all kind of right there on the campus. And before we took the tour, you had us look at this picture on the wall, and you said, kind of pay attention to this picture because it was the original building
Yeah.
that was on the build that we actually ended up going into, correct?
Yeah, so it's a very old building. The picture you were talking about, it's a picture, I think it's from maybe 1920 or so, maybe a little
Wow.
earlier.
Okay.
And yeah, you can see the building, and as you were able to see, we kept the building, as original as possible, and it looks really cool. Like we got lucky to find this amazing building right in the heart of Asheville downtown.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then like the kitchen tap room breweries, no, maybe it's just the kitchen and tap room side. That's all kind of newer stuff, right? Where we kind of started.
Yeah, well, it has. We opened in 2017, so it's getting to almost 10 years. Yeah, that's where we some people think and they don't know all this part of the yeast and fermentation with it. They think we are a restaurant.
Yeah.
But that's the good thing, because people who come to the restaurant and don't know anything about White Labs, they learn about White Labs. And we were able to kind of like mix all the fermentation side of things we do in the lab and stuff with the restaurant, right? Like our pizzas are made with brewer's yeast.
Yeah.
And also a brewery, also we brew beer for the tap room. We just don't make beer like we don't make just one IPA and one Hefeweizen, let's say, or one, I don't know, Pilsner. What we do right now is pairs. So basically what we're trying to do is to showcase the yeast and show people how the impact yeast has in beer. So basically, let's say I'll give you an example. We have we call it Tabarer IPA. So we make a batch, and then when we go into the fermenter, we split it in two fermenters, and we pitch one yeast in one fermenter and another yeast, a different yeast in the other fermenter. So it's all the same wort, same everything. And the only difference is the yeast. And some people get amazed when they try it side by side, the difference that yeast can make in color, in appearance, in aroma, flavor. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was to say, I bet they're blown
Yeah.
away. Like, you telling me this beer started the same and then it's two
Yeah.
different things now? I bet that blows them away.
Yeah. Some people like, no, I can't believe it. And that's what it shows how important yeast is. It's not just like a lot of people think that they only make alcohol and CO2, and that's very far from true, right? Like roughly 80% of the aromas and flavors in a beer are touched by yeast. Many of them are made by yeast, and some other are touched, like meaning how yeast interacts with hops. For example, like we see in some of these beers, and the IBU of both beers are different. And how is that possible? Both beers have the same amount of hops, but that shows you how yeast, depending on the strain, how differently they interact with hops.
Well, I was going to say, for people that if they go on your website, which is just, I mean, it's extraordinary at whitelabsbrewingco.com, what you were just explaining there, not only is it on your website, but you can click each link and there's a detailed explanation of that. I mean, can you talk about the process just from that alone of who is doing that? Because that has to be very educational for people that are coming in and getting that brewery experience.
Yeah, we do all in house, right? We have a lab, we have an analytical lab. So as we brewing the beers, we keep getting samples and analyze everything. So what people can do is, as you guys said, like go to the website and you'll see the recipe, You see what yeast was used. You can see the fermentation curve. You can see, I don't know, information like diacetyl levels or gluten levels. There's so many different, so a lot of information in there that people, and that's cool because not only that, it's cool just to see it and understand, but also a lot of brewers or home brewers as well, when they like a beer, they just go to the website and replicate that recipe,
Right.
Well, and I was going to say, a lot of times you could go on a website for a brewery and you'll see a certain style of beer that they have, but yours is taking it to a different level.
Yeah. And that's the idea, to show everything, how we do it, and what do they get out of our beers. And our strains too, right? Like how these strains, the strain that we choose for specific beers, how they behave, temperatures, everything.
A cool thing when you're talking about your beers, like just looking on your menu for the beers, it shows the yeast strain per each one. Like even in the Taber IPA category, it's West Coast is WLP 001 and the hazy style is WLP 00 or 066. Every beer style on there has the yeast strain on it, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the way so people can actually learn and see why they like it, right? Oh, I like this one better than this one. Okay, so if they brew, they can choose that strain, or if they just like to drink beer, they kind of start to understand the different types of IPAs, and it's not just hops who makes an IPA different. It's yeast also.
Was that the original idea when you started this website, that you all wanted to have all of this information on there right away for anybody that was coming in? Or is that something that evolved over time?
It can evolve over time, but basically we started mostly just by brewing the beer, and we wanted to showcase the yeast. We wanted to, like I said at the beginning, education for us, it's so important. So we wanted to start educating people in terms of like what yeast can do, on how important also is, like when you develop a recipe. Unfortunately, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes or most of the time, uh, brewers start thinking about what type of malts I'm going to use, what hops I'm going to use, and this and that. And at the end, they're like, okay, maybe I should use this strain. So by learning this and understanding this, I think you can actually even start a recipe thinking what strain of yeast you want to use based on what you want to do, and then move, you know, forward with the recipe.
Are you guys, and probably you specifically, able to tell someone if they called you up and say, hey, I'm looking for a yeast strain that does this. These are my other ingredients. I want it to do this. Are you guys able to help them and point them in a direction?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I said, um, strains are, it's like people, right? Like they all like yeast, right? But we all humans, but we all different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same concept. So if you're looking for something specific, yeah, we can point it out and help them finding the right yeast for what they're looking.
This seems like an obvious question, but for the layman, and Steve and I know the answer to this, but we want for everybody else who's listening, can you tell us what yeast is? Like as a bare, kind of a simple answer, if there is one.
It's a single cell fungus, right? That so it's microscopic. You can't really see it with the naked eye, and yeast is everywhere, right? It's not just a labs, right? You see a fruit, you see flowers, yeast is everywhere. Probably you have yeast around you right now. And but the yeast we know now, at least for beer or wine or cider or anything, it's very different than the yeast you can find right now, in the wild, because it has been domesticated, which is kind of cool. It's been domesticated by brewers throughout thousands of years without knowing. right? So yeast are adapting to the environment brewers were putting that yeast on. So they've been gaining a lot of great attributes and lost some that, for example, if you got yeast from a lab, brewer's yeast, if you throw it in the wild, it probably is not going to survive.
Right. And for thousands of years, they almost thought it was until they could see yeast under a microscope. They never really knew what it was. They knew something happened, right? And they knew how to make beer, but they never really knew what that thing was until they could actually see it.
Yeah, there was so many theories, right? Like the first, I don't know, my German's pretty bad, but Reinheitsgebot, I think it's called, the purity law, the German purity law. That right now it says that if you follow that law, the only ingredients for beer are like grain, malt, right, hops, water, and yeast. But the original one in the 1500s, or I think it's 1500s, it didn't include yeast because they didn't know yeast existed. Right. So there were so many different theories at the time, very, very probably thousands of years ago, or I don't know exactly, but some people were calling it God is good altogether. God is good, meaning God is good. like they thought it was something from the gods, like giving them this beverage. And then there was other theories about like a chemical reaction between malt and water. There was so many different theories. Even when they figured out that there was this microorganism was the cause of the fermentation, they didn't know where it was coming from, right? So they thought it was just some spontaneous generation out of the whatever. It was just spontaneously generate there. They didn't know until like late 1800s with Pasteur was actually the guy who was like, no, it comes from the air, right? And that's why you guys need to clean, because there's other microbes too coming from the air, and if you don't clean properly, you will like spoil your beer.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. So yeast does a couple of things in beer: creates CO2, creates alcohol, which is the part we like the best, I think. But there are also other byproducts of yeast too, aren't there?
Oh yeah, like flavors, compounds like esters, fusel alcohol. It also reduce the pH of the beer to make it safe drinking it. Phenols, some strains, right, from like Belgian strains and stuff. They produce phenols who actually have flavor. Diacetyl, people don't really want it, but it's a flavor, right? So there's so many different, flavors. And again, aromas too, because yeast interacting with hops, can, touch, like, one thing I like to say is like, when, it's very basic, but, hops are amazing. I love hops too, and they smell great. But when you add it, let's say you boiling hops, when you making the wort and you done before going into the fermenter, if you try that wort before the fermentation with all these great hops you added, probably even at the end of the boil, because you want a lot of more aroma, it tastes really terrible.
It does.
So right, so I guess beer without yeast is bittersweet.
Right. It's flat. There's no alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. No alcohol, and the flavors are terrible. Like, so whoever's want to make beer or trying to make beer, I'll encourage them to try the wort before fermentation, and then see the final product when they done with the fermentation, and see that's the magic part. Yeah.
You have a lot of folks that are involved in the fermentation process. How fascinated are you to watch them do what they're doing, and are you constantly learning?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Here at White Labs, we make wort every day. We make a lot of wort every day to propagate our strains, and you see all these people working, making sure we have the right amount of yeast to pitch or inoculate into this vessels. Then we propagate the strains and all the quality control, quality assurance keep points we have throughout the whole process. It's amazing. Then the harvest, it's really, it's amazing.
Can you talk about the quality control of your yeast? Because you have, from what I can read, 38 checkpoints that goes through the process. Is that right?
Yeah. So our process takes about 21 days, roughly. Some strain might take a little more, but we like to say 21 days. That's kind of like a good time we found that we can make the best yeast possible. It's like we're growing these amazing cells, and then they're like super healthy and ready to ferment. So throughout this 21-day process, starts at the lab, probably stays at the lab for about a week, growing in there. We keep our yeast in our cryogenic freezers. They're like minus 80 Celsius. Pretty
Okay.
cold.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
kind of like Walt Disney style.
I was going to say, you don't want to stick your hand in there.
Walt Disney's head is in that
yeah.
temperature right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like a good way to keep yeast from shifting, from drifting, from changing, from mutating. We want to, give brewers consistency when it comes to yeast and fermentation, right? So as we know, yeast will mutate. It will start changing, right? That's what happened throughout thousands of years. So if you don't want that to happen, if you want WLP 001 California Ale to be the same at all times, that's how you have to keep it, And from them, we start moving into plates, growing colonies, then moving into like small amount of liquid media until like we have enough, yeast. Then we can go into our main production. And, all those days, like we take samples every day and make tests and stuff, make sure there's no contamination, make sure, everything's going the way it should, right? Like when we talk about contamination, it's not just contaminated from another microbe, it could be contaminated from a different type of yeast. Then it will not be just California ale, it will be California ale plus something else, right? So we want to
Yeah.
make sure everything it's exactly the way it should. So that's the only way we can provide the best yeast possible. Also, giving them the most healthy yeast possible. So brewers can not only just buy yeast from White Labs and make one batch of beer, they can make several batch of beer. They can keep reusing. The healthier you get the yeast, the healthier you start your fermentation, the more generations, the more reuse you can have from that yeast. And that's super important. That's cool.
Is that like distilleries do when they kind of carry over a mash or something from batch to batch? Is that same kind of thing where you've got that consistency between, you keep some of the yeast from the last batch and put it into the next batch kind of thing? Is that something different?
I don't know exactly because it depends, because that is if a distiller, it's a good question, because if the distillers are actually fermenting in grain, right, which that doesn't happen in beer. In beer, you just separate the grain from the wort, and then you just add the yeast to the wort directly in a fermenter. Many distilleries do that, but also a lot of more old school, they just ferment in grain. So there is a chance when they pull some of that and add it to the next batch to keep fermenting. Yeah, it's kind of like sourdough, probably a little bit of that. Yeah,
I think that process, I might be wrong, but that process in distilling is maybe a sour mash. I really think that's
sour
what that
mash.
is.
Yeah, that's kind of like more
what it
because
is.
you want more a little bit of like bacteria also, good bacteria there, like growing. So that's kind of like more of that. But it's not about basically reusing the yeast per se, like brewers. Like brewers, they got all these yeast in the cone, right? And they can harvest that and reuse it in the next batch.
Wow, that's something that we hadn't thought about, Steve. The next time we talk to a brewer is ask if they do that. That's actually a really
Yeah.
great thing because that helps them, right? They don't necessarily have to buy more. They can kind of continue to use it until maybe the life cycle of that yeast runs out.
Yeah. So I would say, I don't know, I would say 90% of the breweries reuse yeast. It depends on the brewery, right? Some they don't brew that often, so yeast. You have to keep it in certain ways to if it's not gonna be fermenting, and you're gonna save it to use in a different batch in 3-4 days or a week or so. You need to keep it in the cooler, cold, without any oxygen, and then that's fine. But no, like if you're not gonna reuse it, if you try to reuse yeast in a month or more, that yeast probably is not gonna be great.
As a home brewer, I'm sure it can be done. That's going to take another process or another
Yeah.
thing to do that I just probably won't keep up with. And there are probably guys out there that do that, but I'm like, yeah, I'm dumping it. I can't.
Yeah, I used to homebrew a lot, and I just did it a few times just to kind of like check it out, and it works great for homebrewers, unless you have this kind of cool small like conical fermenters. If you ferment in a bucket or in a carboy, it's a little more difficult because you have to get rid of all the beer first, right? And then ideally you want to leave a little bit of liquid on top of the yeast cake. And maybe if you need, add a little of like distilled water or something so you can rerouse it and make it more liquidy so you can actually pour it out to a mason jar or something and save it.
Okay.
But
And
it's
then does
doable, yeah.
does oxygen affect the yeast too if in that situation?
Yeah, you have to avoid as much oxygen as possible. That's why the more rudimentary you are and with tools and stuff, the less yeast will like last.
Yeah.
Like oxygen triggers fermentation. The minute yeast sense there's oxygen there, they start using it to start building lipids, fatty acids, to try to start like it's time to grow. It's time to ferment. So,
Right.
and they start using some of their reserve sugars they have. And if yeast is losing all that, by the time you really need it to actually ferment, it's gonna be kind of weak. It's not gonna be uh, ready to
Right.
ferment.
With all the advanced research that and high standards you have in fermentation, talk about the technology behind that, because obviously that you've had to probably keep up with that over the years.
Yeah, at Wild Labs we innovated a lot, right? Like innovation for us is huge, right? Like try always to push the envelope. Actually, probably it's not exactly related with technology specifically. If you talk about like machinery and stuff, which later on we did, but at the beginning, before Chris White, before Wild Labs, Wild Labs from 1995, before 1995, there was not what people know today as pitchable yeast, right? First of all, dry yeast for beers was non-existent basically at the time. It was just
I would not. I think so, right?
bread yeast, and it makes pretty bad beer. And then there was another lab before White Labs who actually started making liquid yeast, but at the time, the yeast you could get before White Labs was not concentrated enough. So that's when starters that's so popular among homebrewers became popular because you needed to grow whatever that liquid yeast you were buying. You needed to grow it in order to pitch that into your 5 gallons. So I think what was amazing, now it's kind of like a normal thing, but at the time, Chris White, his first innovation was actually concentrate the yeast enough so you didn't need to make a starter. You could pitch directly what you buy from us, and you have fermentation. So that was a first key. I guess you can call it technological at the time, but then we moved to what we pure pitch. We used to grow yeast in stainless steel, like any other lab do right now. But starting 2013, 2014, we start working in a different way of doing it. We started doing research and stuff, and we found in the pharmaceutical industry there's this films where they grow human injectables, and they're already sterilized. So that means less moving, because when you work with a fermenter like type of like stainless steel, you have to move the yeast a lot. You have to clean it. Now you have to use chemicals. You need to rely on someone cleaning properly. So when we moved to this new technology, we have these films, and they're like, in this case right now, we have like 400 liters, pretty big, and they already come sterilized. We sterilize it with gamma radiation, and then we actually grow the yeast in there, and there's no room for errors of like someone not cleaning properly or contaminated or less moving the yeast around so it can pick up oxygen. Same as beer, right? Like the less oxygen you get beer in contact, it will spoil any great beer. Same with yeast.
Yeah. The containers, would you say they're 400 liters?
Yeah.
I saw them, Steve. It looks like something from a science fiction movie. It really is. You could see through them, and they're bubbling, and you can see the stuff in them. It looks really cool.
I just think that it's an interesting conversation to think to 1995 to now, 2026, what people knew then in fermentation and what they know now, and how much better the beer is now. Not to say it wasn't good then, because that's what they knew, right? I mean, look at the evolution of even that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris White always tell me the story that when he started, there were no IPAs. You
Yeah.
can't think of like a beer industry right now without an IPA,
Yeah.
right? They were like amber lagers. That was a cool beer, an amber lager, not amber lager, an amber ale. People like craft beers were not even making lagers at the time. That was just for microbreweries. But yeah, like that's like people start, pushing more, and trying to learn and start creating different styles and things like hazy IPAs, or revamping old forgotten styles like Rudzitskis or saisons, stuff that they were like just regional beers at the time, and they became like and that's the beauty about beer, right? Like wine depends a lot of the terroir, right? Like it depends if you don't grow, you need to specific grape to make specific wine, and if you don't live in that area, you screw, right? So,
Right.
but beer, the amazing thing about beer, you get the right grain, you get the right hops, you can get it very easily. Even if you're making a German style beer, you can get those hops, you can get the right grain, you get the right yeast. You just adjust a little bit of the water if you want, like kind of like making it a little closer to the area, and that's it. You can make a perfect and amazing German style beer in North Carolina or in Tennessee.
That's right.
Yeah,
You
or
can,
anywhere.
yep. Speaking of which, I'm actually drinking something that has yeast in it, and it's from one of your neighbors, Burial, and they've got the greatest names: Cognitive Indifference Towards Something More Fulfilling. It's a West Coast IPA, which is incredible.
They're famous for their names.
Their names. When I was there, we went multiple times, and I would go up to the bartender. I go, "You don't need the whole name, do you?" She goes, "Nah, just like the first two letters or first two words. That's all you need."
When I go
Just
there,
give me
I'm
that
like,
number 3 beer right there.
give me that. And I just
Yeah.
They don't got 15 minutes for you to order one beer based on the name. Steve, what are you sipping on?
I am drinking Zool tonight out of Knoxville and Nashville, of course.
Yeah.
Zool,
It is Sunshine is My Destroyer, which I've had before, which is a sour fruited. And
Interesting.
this is basically it's a gluten-free sour with red raspberry, lemon, vanilla. It's got everything in it.
Got
It's
really
tart, but it's good.
it's got
I
4
enjoy it.
fruits.
Yeah. See
Pablo,
the
I know
color
you're
scheme on this.
Yeah.
Pablo, you're at work, and I see you. Maybe you might not be drinking a beer. I hadn't seen you drink one, but you probably had a few tastings at work before, right? Since you guys brew beer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
We have like shifties, we call it. When we're
yeah,
done with our shift, we have beers at the taproom. It's great, like that's another great thing. Like you'll see a lot of employees finishing their shift and sitting at the taproom and having their shifties. It's great. And asking question and the brewers and the accountant maybe also sitting there too and discussing the beers and yeah, that's a great thing. Like this is an industry that you can have a beer at 11 a.m. and nobody's gonna look at you like you're a weirdo.
Everything is okay then.
Uh,
Pablo, curious, how long have you been with White Labs?
It's almost 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you start at what you're doing now, or did you start in a different role?
No, I started what I'm doing now. I was a little less technical, I guess. I learned a lot during this 10 years. I was always, even when I was making beer, I was always hooked by the fermentation, the cold side, right? Like, even when I started home brewing, like every home brewer, was like, "Hmm, maybe I'm going to invest some money and buy this big, nice, pump, systems, right? Pretty expensive, right? And then talking with my local homebrew shop, this guy, you know, said something to me. He's like, you know, you spend the money however you want, but why don't you start spending money first on your cold side? Get a better fermenter, try to see if you can find a way to have temperature control, and you'll realize and you don't need all this fancy equipment to make wort, right? So I heard that advice, and my beer went from terrible to really good. So
Yeah.
because I'm not saying that making good wort or making wort is not important. What I'm saying is like where you make the difference, it's in the cold side, right? Like you can make the best wort possible. You can check you hit the right sugar content, you hit the right pH, everything went perfect, and then you have a terrible fermentation. Probably the beer is not going to be good.
right.
And you can make like I made great beers, and when my mash got stuck, I was like pulling wort with grain. I was getting dark. I was like, man, I'm just whatever. I'm just gonna throw this in the fermenter, but I'm gonna make sure my fermentation is good and the beer turned out great.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with home brewing. Is I need to invest, upgrade my cold side, whatever that. I don't really have one. It's more, I've really just really done ales and just kind of did the room temperature
Yeah.
thing. But I tried a lager once, and I tried to reverse engineer my refrigerator, make it warmer. It didn't quite work that way. So, and I would like to be able to make some kind of lager or something.
Yeah, there
So
are
I need-
ways without spending a lot of money. Then you can actually. I would start with like you don't need a conical fermenter, right? Unless you're gonna be, but just a stainless steel fermenter that will make a big difference, and then something that you can actually control better the temperature.
Yeah, I did last time I brewed. I did something different. I fermented in a keg, in a corny keg, and then transferred it to another keg for serving. And the main reason for that was oxidation. It didn't touch the air into secondary. And then that
Yep.
was my serving keg. So that was kind of cool. It did make a little bit of
Yep.
a difference.
I sometimes think it has to be cool when you're sitting around and all of a sudden something else has been brewed, fermentation, there's been something new. You ever tease your buddies about, you know what? We got something new on the horizon and I've already tried it. You think this beer is good now? Wait till you try it next time.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens happens a lot. Like everything, right? Like the beer people making right now could be great, but then maybe choosing a different type of strain of yeast will like improve or get more for what they want. But like it's up to what they want, right? Like and I think the biggest challenge we talk about home brewers, I think the biggest mistake that I made too is like as home brewers, we you just make a different beer every time. So you never really nail the beer you want unless you're really good at it and you're happy. But in general, once I stopped that craziness of making an IPA, the next time a saison, the next time a Belgian quadruple, the next time whatever. Uh, Once I stopped that, I'm like, okay, I want to make a good IPA. So it's like work on the IPA, work on the recipe. You're gonna make it first. You're gonna try and like be, I don't like this, I don't like that. So then you make adjustment. That's why taking notes, knowing all the parameters, temperature. The worst thing you can do as a brewer is say like, "Oh, this working. I'll remember next time." You're not gonna remember. You never. There's no way you're gonna remember.
Yep.
Just take notes, and it's amazing. Next time you look at it, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm on the right path, or not. I need to adjust this. I need to adjust that." Until like you find the beer you like and how it tastes, and then you just repeat it.
Yeah, you dial it in, and I think that's where I need to go next is to kind of not necessarily perfect, but work on one style and dial it in and make it better and better every time. Because
Yeah,
I do the same thing. I jump around.
yeah, and the other thing is the equipment, right? Like it's every equipment is different, right? So that's why it's not easy. If I make a great IPA and I give you the recipe, it's not going to be the same,
Right.
right? Because we have different equipment. That's the reason why breweries, when they just open, I always try to give them 3 or 4 months before actually judge them as a good or not good brewery, because they need to learn the equipment, and that's very important.
Yeah, it might be a larger scale than they're used to, or just dialing it in. Yeah.
So many factors.
Yep. There's something you guys have, and I think it's mind blowing. Maybe it's all the same to you guys, but I think it's awesome. It's called, is it Modigen D?
Yeah.
It's like your next generation line of bioengineered brewing yeast. And what I think is awesome about this is designed to eliminate diacetyl before it even starts. Like that's a game changer. That's huge. Like that's going to take the work out for like most home brewers or even brewers in general. Can you talk about that thing?
And let me say
Yeah.
real quick, not to miss the headline, but it's a really big headline on your website. Like, so look at this. This is a game changer. So Scott's not just reading it off. I mean, it's
Yeah.
actually on what you all really are promoting right now.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a problem people have. Brewers have with diacetyl, and it's like if you could eliminate that, holy shit.
Yeah. So to follow up on that question too, how new is that for you all, and where has it gone from other folks that are interested in using that?
It's pretty new, has a couple of months only. So we decided to go into bioengineers trains. All our life we just make natural yeast and stuff. But why not, right? Like it's kind of fun. And so if you want, I can explain a little bit how diacetyl is formed and all that, how it works.
Please.
Basically, yeast doesn't really produce diacetyl. What happened is yeast during fermentation produce a precursor called alpha-acetolactate. This precursor drips out of the cell into the beer, and by oxidation becomes diacetyl in the beer. Now, if you have yeast in suspension still and it's still active, the cool thing is that yeast can reabsorb that diacetyl and convert it in a different compound that has no flavor or aroma or anything, right? So that's why diacetyl, the problem with diacetyl is like diacetyl is going to be formed all the time. If there's fermentation, there's going to be diacetyl formation because yeast is going to produce this alpha-acetolactate. It's going to excrete it out of the cell into the beer, and diacetyl is going to get formed by oxidation. Now, the problem with when you actually taste diacetyl smell in a beer is either you pull the yeast before was actually able to reabsorb it, or you cool down really quick and now yeast is not very active. You crash cold and then yeast is not active and cannot reabsorb that yeast, that diacetyl. So that's how diacetyl gets formed. So the cool thing about this, the Modigen D, is like basically there's an enzyme called ALDC that, there is a product that you can actually add right now outside. Like you just add it to your fermenter. And when yeast created this alpha-acetolactate, this enzyme will convert, convert this precursor into the compound that has no flavor. So it never becomes diacetyl, right? So you add it to the fermentation. Now this is cool is like all that is happening inside the cell. So by this bioengineered yeast, is actually producing this enzyme, this ALDC enzyme inside the cell, so it won't let have this conversion. So basically, the yeast is not excreting any alpha-acetolactate and becoming diacetyl outside the cell.
That is absolutely me. That is science at its best.
It is science at its best. And again, I'm looking at your website. There's a whole section, frequently asked questions, everything. My question is, was this research that initially you all set out to do and wanted to come up with? And if so, how long did it take for you to come up with this yeast?
No, there are there are other labs doing it too. I guess the difference there's different ways of doing it. One is called CRISPR. That's the most used by other labs, but we use a different one called Krelox that we think works better. I don't want to go really deep into why, but basically, in a nutshell, we've seen that with this method we use in which it's doing it right now. You can repitch yeast this yeast better. So more generation. Nowadays cost is a big thing for breweries. Unfortunately, the industry is not as strong as it used to be. So that's what we want. We want people to buy great, amazing yeast, but also be able to reuse it many times and reduce the cost.
Can that new yeast be used in different styles? Is it going to be kind of catered for different styles, or is it kind of one size fits all?
No, yeah, it's not a different yeast. So it's basically we chose 4 of our strains and work on this. So one is the California, one is the London Fog, the other one is the German Lager, the 830, and the other one is the Vermont strain. So we chose 4 strains, and we work on this bioengineered strain. So if you've been using Cali, it's gonna be the same Cali, but the only thing is like it's not gonna let this diacetyl.
Right.
And let me read something real quick to just on that one is so the Vermont ale yeast, according to your website, and this is really interesting. The strain produces a complex, fruity ester profile of peach, apricot, and like light citrus that complements any aggressively hot beer. So very, very interesting, descriptive. Has to be a lot of breweries out there that would be interested in something like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's great for, brewers mostly use it for like hazies, like
Yeah.
IPAs, or then they want a little more fruit
Yeah.
character. So yeah, it's a great strain.
Why would someone not use them within those 4 styles that you talked about? Why would someone not use that? Is it just cost maybe? Because again, it takes some of
No, there's
the
not really a big difference. It's a little bit more, but not substantial or anything. I guess some people don't feel like the need. They have a good process.
yeah.
They never have issues with diacetyl. Some people are like very traditionalist. They're like, no.
Eating.
This, yeah, those people who actually don't want to use enzymes at all. Like enzymes to do different type of jobs, then they can make the beer better, or like there's enzymes to reduce gluten, right? There's enzymes like this one who actually avoid diacetyl formation. There's many different enzymes who do different jobs. The enzymes who actually cut down sugars, right? If you want to up your ABV in a beer, or if you want to have like close to 0 sugars, you can use glucoamylase enzymes, right? We call it ultra firm White Labs. And so it cuts down maltose or any more complex sugar all into glucose, so yeast can eat everything. So there's some people, no, I don't want to add anything, right? That's more like a German point of view, right? They don't. So German, if you follow German brewer, if you follow the Reinheitsgebot, you can only use water, hops, malt. and
That's
yeast.
it.
Right. You
We've
better have
learned
that. Yeah, you better have that process figured out too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
that's
know what
funny.
they're doing.
We can speak on that because we had the folks on from Hofbräu House earlier this year, and they could talk about that. And Scott, you've been in Germany, not exactly a whole big craft beer mecca there. They're doing what
No.
they did
Well,
hundreds of
traditionalist.
years ago, and they're
Yep.
sticking to the same couple
Yeah.
ingredients.
It's a working formula for sure.
And I think it's great because, we have a lot of craft breweries in the rest of the world. Like if in Germany, they want to keep these traditions and keep making the original styles of beers and how they were made for years. It's great.
Yeah, I'll tell you, just by being over there, it gave me so much of a newfound appreciation for those styles, and really drinking and tasting and understanding what those are and how good they are. When I came back here, I brought that with me. When I find a lager or pilsner here, I can really appreciate them.
Yeah. And that's the thing, drinking it fresh, because probably what we get here is not the best. It takes time traveling across from Europe to here. I don't know if it's kept cold at all time. Probably not. So it's amazing. It's still good beers,
Yep.
but when you taste it there, it's so different, right? Like, have you ever tried Orval?
I
Probably
haven't, no.
here I have.
Yeah.
Orval is an amazing Belgian. It's like a Trappist, but it has this. If you try it here in the States or anywhere outside Belgium, it's kind of funky. It has
Yeah.
this Brettanomyces type of flavor and stuff, and it's everybody loves it because of it. But if you go to Belgium, that's not the flavor.
It doesn't have.
Actually, the brewer who makes this beer hates that flavor. He's like, that's not the way Orval should taste, and we all love it here because it tastes like that. So that's amazing, right?
Guinness is something along those lines where I was in Ireland, had it over there, fantastic. Come over here, and it comes from there. It's brewed there. You don't brew it here, so it's brewed, but I think it's just a freshness thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, makes sense.
Freshness for beer. It's so important. Like,
It is.
if I go to a supermarket, and I'm a IPA guy, so fortunately, if I don't see a date, I don't buy it. If I see a date and it's past, I'm very picky, but if past like a month or a month and a half, I don't buy it.
That is picky.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm the crazy one who actually people looking at the cans.
What's he doing?
Yeah.
Like, and
You're like, where is it?
Yeah, because I try amazing IPAs, like great brands, great brewers, and I just buy them, and if past their time, they're
Yeah.
not great.
Pablo, can I tell you something real quick? Because this is actually a conversation that Scott and I were just having recently, and we were texting a couple nights ago with some friends of ours. If you go into a grocery store and you see beer, and maybe it's been there for a long time, maybe there's some brands that they're no longer selling
Or are in
and
business.
yeah, no longer in business.
But there's another one, and this is really
Yeah.
cool. Like years ago, same happened. I went to the local supermarket, and there was this cart full of beer, and they're like on sale for like nothing. I don't know, $3 a 6-pack. And when I look, I see probably 5 or 6 6-packs of Bigfoot, the barley wine from Sierra Nevada.
Get out of here.
And those are great because those beers, they can handle time unless they were under the sun, which they were not. Right. So probably they were not cold at all times, but those age, right? Actually, people do this. They get across years, right? They do a
Yeah,
6
like do the
packs,
verticals. Yeah.
the verticals. So
Yep.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna buy all this, and people looking at me, oh, look at this loser buying all this old beer. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, you're the loser.
I just think it's an interesting,
But,
I think it's an interesting conversation because what, depending on the beer and the beer style, but you walk into a grocery
Yeah.
store and you start looking at a date, it's like anything else going, do I really want to buy
Yeah.
that? And why are you still selling
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
yeah, so there are beers who might be fine, right? After like a long time, they can hold because they're high gravity beers, right? So they hold better. But an IPA, nope.
Yeah. Got to be fresh. There's a yeast I keep hearing about, and I'm gonna give a shout out to Nick and Joe from Hop In We're Drinking podcast because I keep hearing it on their podcast a lot because I want to try it. Is the Kveik yeast? Is that something you guys do? Are you familiar with that yeast?
Yeah, we make our pizzas with a Kveik strain.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, we have several different ones. Kveiks come from Norway. They're like what people call they follow under the farmhouse umbrella, let's say. What it's interesting about the strains is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, like any other ale strain. But what is interesting is that they can ferment really hot and still be clean. Clean meaning like it won't produce a lot of crazy. Like if you grab any other ale strain and ferment at 90 degrees, you're not gonna like that beer very much.
Nope.
It's gonna be full of fusel alcohol and crazy ester, so it's not gonna be what you call a clean beer. But these strains can. So it's very interesting how they mutate also to work that way, and also it was part of how people were using it in Norway is the reason they work the way they work.
Yeah, it's very versatile, right? And for somebody maybe doesn't back to the cold side that you were talking about, maybe if you don't have the proper stuff, that might benefit you, which is actually what I'm kind of thinking of getting on the next brew.
Yeah, it's great. What I like about it is like they're like again ferment hotter. So what it means then your fermentation is going to be done quicker.
Yeah.
And so a lot of breweries are using it. It's not as much as it used to be. Like probably years ago, they were like super popular, and everybody wanted to use them. Now it kind of slowed down. People are going more for the traditional strains and stuff. But I think they're still great strains.
Yeah, it's also one of those maybe those purists that you were talking about earlier. Like, hey, it's kind of cheating in a way if we have temperature control and whatnot.
But they're not bioengineered or anything. They're natural strains.
Okay.
There's a theory. I'm not 100% sure if it's true. It makes sense. Like these strains come from farmers in Norway, and basically, a farmer is not a brewer. They just work in the farm all day, but they will make beer for themselves, right? And larger amounts than a home brewer. So maybe for the whole winter or whatever, or for the summer. And they will actually traditionally, as a tradition in Norway, they will like boil for too long, like probably even like 2 hours or more, 3, right? Not sure why exactly. They will use juniper and different type of adjuncts and stuff, kind of different. But the theory is that they've been basically working on the farm and brewing at the same time. So on the farm, you don't have electricity, or at the time they didn't have electricity. So you start working on the slide, you go to sleep when it gets dark. So probably boiling for that long and not having a way to chill that to the right temperature, they probably started adding yeast at very hot temperatures, probably around 90 or so. So yeast start adapting to that temperature and
Wow.
start working. So that's what's amazing about yeast, right? Like same as what's talking earlier, yeast basically adapted to what we wanted, and if Peter goes, oh, we don't like this beer, toss the yeast away. Oh, we like this beer, reuse the yeast.
Yeah.
So that's how yeast,
Yeah.
started to, evolve and change,
Yeah, that's cool. Something, and I know you guys, and maybe most people do know you from liquid yeast, White Labs. Do you guys do any dry yeast?
Yes, we do.
You do?
We have
Okay.
a few strains in dry as well. Yeah, our main thing, main core, everything is liquid yeast. But we wanted to also some breweries like dry yeast, convenience in dry yeast in terms of maybe shelf life. So more and more we start having people asking, "Oh, I love your strain. I love this specific strain, but for whatever reason, I can't repitch. So I can't. I have. I like to have yeast all the time in my cooler. I can grab a brick and throw it there and keep moving." So we basically we're like, okay, let's start like making probably what we think is the best dry yeast out there in terms of like we know what liquid yeast can do for beer, and so we wanted to kind of like try to replicate and have our dry yeast as close as the quality of our liquid as possible. So we do a lot of like QC, QA, like we really want to make it as best as possible out there.
I bet shipping is probably a big deal too. Shipping dry yeast versus shipping the liquid yeast, because you don't usually have to like pack it in like dry ice and all that. The liquid yeast,
That's
keep it cold.
liquid. You have to keep it cold. Dry yeast. Usually, if you're gonna keep it, it's always better to keep it cold. But if you're gonna ship it for a day or two or so, it's fine to ship it
It's okay.
at room temperature, whatever it is.
Are there some other pros and cons between dry yeast and liquid yeast, just in general?
Personally, I think I like liquid yeast. I think it can express flavors and aromas better. There has to be a difference, right? Like liquid yeast is produced daily, freshly. It's like going to the farm and squeeze milk out of the cow. And
Good
right,
analogy.
it's like we make small batches every time. When it comes to dry yeast, you make tons of that dry yeast. It's liquid yeast and you dry it basically, right? So you extract all the water. And again, I think if you will ask me 5 years ago or maybe a little more, I would be like, oh no, I don't want dry yeast at all. I think dry yeast became really, really good right now. And like people been learning how to dry it better and keep it healthier and stuff. So that's what I was saying. Like when we did the first test for dry, that's what we wanted. We wanted to be as close at our liquid as possible. And I think we did a pretty good job.
I've got a personal question for just home brewing. Can you pitch too much yeast in, say, a 5-gallon batch? Like if I put 2 packets in, does that hurt anything at the end of the day, or is it just
Scott's asking for a friend?
I'm asking for my next batch.
if you add 2 packs, it will be fine. Actually, probably it's going to be great.
Yeah.
When you overpitch is when you can overpitch if you actually grabbing when you reuse yeast, because yeast can grow like 3-5 times. So if, let's say, a case of overpitching in a homebrew level, let's say some people, which I think is a little nasty, but some people still like rack the beer out of the fermenter, leave the yeast at the bottom, and then pour some wort on top of it. Then you can overpitch, because think about, like, you added X amount of yeast to have a good fermentation. That yeast grew 3-5 times. So now you have 3-5 times more cells. And now you add in the same amount of wort and maybe the same gravity. Now you having a lot of, at homebrew level, you might not see a huge problem. It's mainly for pro breweries when they trying to reuse yeast, and if they continually overpitch, what happened is that you have so many cells, then yeast, that's for the amount of sugars you add in, they don't feel the need to grow much. And they're also competing a lot for the nutrients, and there are a bunch of them, so they don't grow properly. So you ended up, if you move it, you using 1, 2, 3 generations, you ended up with very old cells and no new cells. So a good balance is like you need a balance of old and new cells at all times to have great fermentation. It's like humans, right? If suddenly there's no young people, all young people disappear, and we're just old people, we're not going to last long.
That's gone.
Yeah. A good balance is good.
Okay, so but for my thing, if I pitch 2 packets or something,
but when it comes from the labs, you usually don't have that much cells.
Pablo,
to,
you
like,
might need to
super
visit
over.
Nashville and watch Scott brew some beer sometime. Maybe you could help
I'd be a
him
little
out with
nervous. He could probably throw me some pointers, I'm sure.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Well, we don't want to keep you forever. I got a couple fun little things at the end, and Steve might have something else after. If you wouldn't mind, we'll just go through a couple quick answer kind of things.
Sure.
Be a little fun. All right. Any misconceptions about yeast?
I think that all yeast is made the same, or all yeast are. I think something that it bothered me a little bit is overhearing a brewer once saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeast is just yeast. It just produces alcohol and CO2, and and I think that's totally not true, right? And also how you grow it, right? Like, no wonder we are one of the best labs in the world, because we care of it. So producing great yeast is not easy. So that's I think is a misconception about yeast.
Very nice. Have you heard any stories of people using yeast in a weird way?
No, but some people get grossed out when I tell them that they some brewers, they need to actually taste the yeast to see if it's still good or not.
Okay, really? You could taste it and tell if it's good or not?
Yeah.
Scott, my question is, have you?
I have tasted yeast. Yeah, it's crazy. I love the smell of yeast, and the taste. If it tastes a little fruity, a little estery, that's fine. If it tastes, it's like anything, right? If it doesn't taste good, or tastes a little weird, that's telling you that it's not great. So
okay. So you just learn by experience what a good yeast tastes like versus what something maybe has gone bad.
Yeah, brewers will know. It has to still taste fresh.
Yeah,
you'll know if I put in front of you good yeast and not good yeast, and you taste it, you know immediately what I'm talking about.
Okay. Two more quickly. If yeast strains had personalities, which yeast would be the diva and which would be the rock star?
The diva. Well, I think it's like maybe the English strains might be a little more of a diva. I don't know, just saying, because they've been forever, but what they have is that they tend to like consume the sugars and then flocculate. I'm done. with this. So that's why usually English styles of beer, they're accepted to have a little bit of diacetyl, right? If you try a pale ale, like some of these famous breweries in England, they have a certain amount of diacetyl and it's fine. And it's because these strains, they flocculate so hard, like they ferment and then they drop and they make like this big amount of yeast at the bottom of the tank. And if you don't have, like we were talking before, if you don't have yeast active going there and you have diacetyl in the beer, there's no yeast absorbent. So I think that they become a little bit diva by like, I'm done whenever I want to.
Yes.
And I think the rock star is the Kali. Kali Ale is a rock star because, you can make so many different styles of beer. You can make stouts, you can make porters, blonde ales, IPAs, pale ales, amber ales, name it, whatever you want, you can make with that strain, and it's so clean and good and let, shine the hops in IPAs and stuff. It's and flocculates the way it should. It's a workhorse, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's an amazing strain.
Yeah,
Making me thirsty there, Pablo. Making me thirsty.
I can appreciate that. I think one of the first White Labs or first kits I ever bought, it had the White Labs in it. It was the California ale strain. For
It's
sure.
still is the number one strain we ever start producing, and also still our number one selling strain. So
nice. All right, I got one last one. What yeast strain would survive an apocalypse?
it depends what type of apocalypse. There's gonna be no oxygen, no nothing. Maybe only
probably
bacteria.
Probably maybe like a zombie apocalypse.
Oh,
probably
so
all the
that'll
yeast.
be fine. Well, now the brewer's yeast is gonna be everything. If all the labs, everything exploded, there's no beer or anything around. Probably brewer's yeast, as I said, they won't survive. Maybe if you're talking about brewer's yeast, maybe Belgian strains might be able to survive because it's still Belgian strains are very interesting. If you see the tree of life in yeast, they're the closest one to wild yeast. And that's the reason they still produce phenols, because yeast need to produce, like any yeast in the wild will produce phenols. Phenols are a way for them to survive in the wild. When they produce these phenols, they kind of keep away other microorganisms fighting for their food or nutrients. But brewer's yeast, because we adapted for so many years, they lost the trait of making phenols, and we like them because of that. Otherwise, all the beers were like phenolic. But not having that attribute of making phenols, they will. Let's say the cryogenic freezers breaks in the apocalypses, and they're free. They're not gonna last very long.
They can't live in the wild.
Yeah, the Brettanomyces will survive.
Okay,
even though they're from a lab, they will survive. Bacteria will survive.
So they'd have to start the beer brewing process all over again.
Yeah.
The wild.
Maybe they will start domesticating us.
Yeah.
Kind of like
that'd be a hell of a sci-fi movie.
With the dinosaurs, humans, and then
the yeast
taking over.
They'd have to grow quite a bit, but they could do it. Steve, what else have you got for Pablo?
I just got one other question. Has the fermentation process of what you all have done, is there a beer that maybe you weren't really high on before that you are now because of what you all do? A beer style?
A beer style? No, I think it's I think what's important is and it comes also together with what we're talking about, the importance of strains. I go sometimes to breweries and I get it. Sometimes they can't really use so many different types of strains, right? It's expensive, or they don't have the program to reuse it and stuff. So sometimes I got breweries who like, oh, try my Kolsch or try my Hefeweizen, but I don't make it with a Kolsch strain or Hefeweizen strain. And there might not be a bad beer. There might be fine, but it's not a Kolsch. It's not a Hefeweizen.
Yeah.
So I think you might get away with some other styles, right? But if you want a Kolsch, you want a Hefeweizen, same as like, it's not the same an English porter than American porter. And basically the difference, yeah, you can use hops, English hops or American hops, but if you use the wrong yeast for an English porter, use an American for an English, you can tell. That's one of the tests you do. I'm a BJCP judge, and that's one of the tests, right? Like they serve you a beer, and you don't know what it is, and they ask you, is a porter, is a English porter, is a American porter? You have to kind of like know the difference, right? And that comes in the basically, yes, you can maybe notice some attributes from the hops, but mainly, at least in my opinion, I can tell like, oh, this is a little more estery. I can maybe had a little hint of maybe diacetyl. This might be an English, or it's super clean. I can sense more like the hops and stuff. This must be an American. So I think that fact of like, when you actually you make a style, but when you use the right strain for that style, it's a huge difference.
Just having that talent, just having that skill of being able to do that. I know it comes with experience and training and stuff, but it still blows my mind.
No one, I'm telling you, I was like, I regret it. I really, if I have to go through all that again, I won't do it. But because, but it's amazing. You like at one point you're like, no, this is not for me. Probably I'm not good at it, and it's not true. Anyone can do it. It's just difficult. You have to learn new thing. You have to like, but I think out of all that, what I'm more proud, and it was part of the thing, more of like identifying, which is kind of cool. If you can identify enough flavor and say, oh, this has this has that, it's amazing. But in my opinion, what if I have to choose something that from all that training and stuff, and also been drinking a lot of beer for many years and working in the industry, it's like the fact that I can tell between a good beer and a bad beer. And that for me is the main, if I have to choose one of the attributes, it's that. And because there's nothing worse than a brewer who doesn't get the difference between a good and a bad beer. I think it's so important, right? Like if you want to call yourself a brewer, it's as important as knowing how to make wort or ferment and stuff. If you're blind to anything, you don't know the difference between a great beer and a subpar beer. That's sad, because you can't do anything about it, right? You can't really work on it and make it better. I think that's a amazing or like very important attribute a good brewer should have.
That could be tap lines. That could be not proper clean glassware. Even those
could be many
things.
things.
Yeah,
could be many things. But at the end of the day, like as a brewer, you should be able to say, well, this is not as good as I should be. And maybe when you don't say it or whatever, you work on it. But I think that's important. You have to understand it's a matter of like caring for the industry, right? Because you are the brewery who all the locals are going to and drink. And if you're making bad beer and you don't know you're making a bad beer, now all the locals think that craft beer tastes like that. And that's kind of sad, right? And and what is funny is like they might be doing great business because people don't know and they like what they like. So this is kind of funny, maybe to close the show of the episode, is like I got a brewer who told me once, it's like the importance of beer and a good business in a brewery is like being consistent. consistently good or consistently bad. But being consistent, because if you start changing things, people will now come to your tap room. I'm like, okay, great.
Why is it different? Either way, right? Why is it different?
Oh,
That's
man.
awesome.
I think it's a good end note, and I'm going to raise my beer
Yeah.
on good
Sorry, I
beer.
don't have a beer, but cheers.
That's okay.
That's okay.
No, Pablo, you started out tremendous and very educational, everything that you walked us through today. And I think the end point of that just sums it up perfectly.
Awesome. Well, thank
Yeah.
you.
Hopefully somebody's learned something from this. I know we did. And back to the
Yeah.
top of the episode is like we try to inform. And you did a fantastic job of doing that, Pablo.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the invitation. And yeah, next time I'm in Nashville, I'll let you. We'll go for a few beers.
Appreciate it. Yeah, go get good beer. Exactly. Thanks,
Yeah.
Pablo. Brewery Underground
Thank
Podcast.
you, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Cheers.